to the story of Sir Gawain and a knight grim in a glittering green, and a lady gay and guile, in the lore of the land so long, in story bold and strong. Christmas time at Camelot, a splendid celebration with many mighty lords and lovely ladies, tournaments, jousts, drinking, dancing, and much merrymaking. On New Year's Day, a feast, the laughing company coming from chapel fills the great hall. Upon the princely platform, glorious Guinevere, set with precious silks and above, tapestries from Toulouse and Turkestan. Upon the dais by the queen's side sat good Sir Gawain, and on the other side Sir Agravain of the hard hand, and nearby Bishop Baldwin and Sir Ewain. The fellowship of the Round Table at its prime. Mirth and feasting filled the hall as lords and ladies lifted golden cups filled with good beer and bright wine. And it was Christmas time in Camelot. King Arthur strode amid the throng, refused to eat till all was served, and until someone shared an adventure, a marvel yet untold, when suddenly the wooden doors of the great hall swung open, and there, an awesome fellow, huge and strong, mettlesome of might, yet handsome still, rode in upon a steed, a knight fiercely grim, and both man and steed all a glittering green. He held a holly branch in one hand, and in the other an axe, huge and monstrous. Who is king of this gathering? Gladly would I speak with him. King Arthur stepped forward. You are welcome to Camelot, Sir Knight. I am king here. Arthur is my name. I come not to tarry in this turreted hall. Your reputation, royal sir, is high, and that of your men is the worthiest the world has known. Therefore, grant me the good sport I demand by right. If it's combat you crave, noble knight, we'll not fail you in the fight. Oh, I seek not combat, but a Christmas game. If any man here truly be a man, he will accept my challenge to strike me with this fine axe. I shall stand upon his stroke, quite still upon the floor, as long as I have leave to launch a return blow, unchecked, a year and a day from this very day. Upon next New Year's Day, who answers, say I. Silence fell upon the crowd in the great hall at Camelot. The Green Knight wrenched himself round in his saddle and rolled his red eyes. What? Is this Arthur's house? Where is your pride, your victory, your valor, your vaunts? Where are they? His laughter roared throughout the hall. The king stepped forward. Hand me your axe. The Green Knight dismounted and handed King Arthur the axe. The king held the axe as if to strike. Confide this fight in me, good king. Gawain is my name, and I accept your challenge. The king bade Sir Gawain to step forward and handed him the axe. Cousin, take care and strike with success. Sir Gawain, I rejoice that you will join me in my game. Now grip your weapon grim. The Green Knight then graciously stood upon the floor, head bent, his long hair laid over his head, baring the naked neck. Gladly, then Sir Gawain lifted the axe and slashed swiftly down, shattering bones, sinking deep into the flesh. The scintillating steel struck the ground, the knight's head fell and rolled upon the floor, and the lords and ladies burned it as it rolled. Blood spurted from the body, bright red against the green. But the fellow did not fall. Oh no. He reached out among the nobles, seized his head, swung himself aloft upon his steed, and holding his head by the hair said, "Upon your oath, Sir Gawain, meet me at the Green Chapel, a year and a day hence upon next New Year's Day. I am known to many as the Knight of the Green Chapel. You may ask for me as you seek your way. Now come, or be called coward." Then he savagely swerved and rushed out of the hall door, his head in his hand. The king, though at heart astounded, let no sign of it be seen. "Well, now I may eat indeed, having lived this tale of adventure. Sir Gawain, hang up your axe. You have hewn enough today. Let us return to our feast. Let there be music." The queen and nobles laughed. The minstrels played upon their pipes and sang. The axe was boldly hung above the dais, and the king and Sir Gawain were served double portions indeed that New Year's Day. Thank you, Z, for that introduction. Thank you, Board of the Jung Society, for inviting me and Henry to perform here tonight. Special thanks to Henry for joining me on this program. Jung said, "Magic always was and still is a source of fascination." Magic features significantly in all the folk narratives, cutting across the three major forms: myth, legend, folktale. The fairy tale, which is considered to be a subset of folktale, is defined by its use of magic, and is perhaps more accurately called a magic tale or a wonder tale, since these stories often feature creatures of many kinds, but not so often actual fairies. The stories that most inspire me are stories of magic and the transformations it brings forth. The stories you'll hear tonight from England, from Ireland, and from Slovakia all feature magic. And that magic is usually associated with the encounter with the numinous. Another subtitle for this program might have been Stories of the Encounter with the Numinous. Jung uses the term numen, numinous, numinosity, numinosum, following the work of Rudolf Otto. Otto coined the term numinous in his 1917 book Das Heilige, which was translated into English in 1923 as the idea of the holy. Otto used the term numen from the Latin, which means to nod. A supplicant at a temple would present a deity with a question, and if the sculpture of that deity seemed to nod, it signified approval. Otto wanted a word to describe the experience of the holy without the connotation of goodness or the moral factor. Otto describes the numinous as ambivalent, a paradox, holding both positive and negative qualities: beauty, awe, majesty, excitement, wonder, fascination, allure, attraction, but also fear, horror, dread, trembling, the experience of being overwhelmed or annihilated. You will find all those qualities in the stories tonight. Additionally, these stories serve to illustrate Marie-Louise von Franz's insight that all fairy tales endeavor to describe one and the same psychic fact: the self. Each of the stories tonight tell us of a human character's numinous encounter with the self and its various archetypes, including the shadow, the anima, the trickster, the terrible mother, and perhaps, I think, one of the most beautiful images for the self itself. As mentioned, the program lasts about 90 minutes. after which we will take a short break and then come back for question and answers, and then end with one last short poem to close our night together. The bookstore is open during the break, and Henry CDs are available for purchase. And thank you all for coming out on this cold night. We return to Sir Gawain and his meeting with the Green Knight at the Green Chapel at the end of our program. But for now, let's get to the stories themselves. Long after Fionn MacCool and the warriors of the Fianna had died, St. Patrick came to Ireland. He heard many stories about Fionn and the Fianna, and he wondered about those old heroes whom the people spoke of as if they were gods. Their stories are written into the very landscape of Ireland. Woods and hills resound with their legends, rivers and valleys bear their names, and Darwins mark their graves. One day, two young men brought a feeble old blind man to St. Patrick. The old man had been a warrior, he said. St. Patrick listened to the man, who claimed to be Oisin, the son of Fionn MacCool himself. Now, St. Patrick doubted the words of this old man, for Fionn had been dead longer than the span of any human life. And so, to convince the saint, Oisin told him his story. Long ago, before the Christians came to Ireland, the people believed in a happy other world called Tir na Nog. There was only happiness and joy there. No suffering, no sickness or aging or death. And sometimes, the story said, human beings could visit Tir na Nog. And Oisin, ever since he was a boy, wished more than anything that he could go. One misty May morning, when the hawthorn trees were in bloom with their white blossoms, Oisin's wish was granted. This was some time after the Battle of Gowra, the last battle the Fianna ever fought. On that morning, the Fianna were hunting along the shores and above the hills near Loch Lean, down in County Kerry. Their hearts were broken. Oscar, Oisin's son, Fionn's grandson, and most of the men of the Fianna were killed in that battle, ending forever the hope of the Fianna's future. Now only a few were left: Oisin, Fionn, and Quilta, their bard, and a few others. They were broken-hearted as they joined the chase of the hunt near Loch Lean. The hawthorn was heavy with the fragrance of the blossoms, and the birds sang sweetly that May morning. But upon the earth, all was quiet. Suddenly, the mist lifted, and there, riding on a milk-white horse, was a beautiful young woman with long, flowing yellow hair. She wore a gown of the richest silk, which was spangled with stars of the brightest gold. And on her head, she wore a crown set with precious rubies and pearls. She rode toward the men and said, "I am Niamh of the golden hair. the daughter of the king of Tir na Nog, and I have come to take you, Oisin, with me, for no man pleases me more than you. Come away with me, Oisin. Come away to Tir na Nog. Oisin was enchanted, bewitched. He had to go. Fionn, his father, was broken-hearted, for he knew he would never see his son again. And so, Oisin mounted the white horse behind Niamh, and as the horse turned to ride toward the shore, Oisin turned to see the green hills of Ireland one last time, and to wave farewell to the Fianna, and promise his father he would return. The horse galloped to the shore, and the waves of the Atlantic Ocean parted before them and closed behind them as they passed. They rode further than you could tell me, and twice as far as I could hope to tell you. They overtook the wind before them, and the wind behind them could not overtake them. And they passed many marbles, cities with golden domes, but Niamh assured Oisin that nothing that he could see could compare to the wonder that lay ahead at Tir na Nog. Finally, they reached a shore, and Oisin saw green rolling plains and blue mountains and waterfalls on every side. This is the most beautiful place I have ever seen. Is this Tir na Nog? Yes, said Niamh. Everything will be just as I told you. And then Oisin saw a glittering crowd coming towards them, led by a king and queen. The king came forward and said to the crowd, "This is Oisin, the son of Fionn McCool. And the man my daughter, Niamh of the golden hair, has selected to be her husband." Then Oisin dismounted the horse, and Niamh and the queen stepped forward and took their hands and joined them together, and the bells rang out across the fields, and the crowd lifted a mighty cheer, and they were wed. Oisin had never known such happiness. 3 years passed very quickly, and never once did Oisin give a thought to Fionn, or the Fianna, or the chase of the hunt, or the company of the men around the campfire. Until one day he saw a shamrock holding a drop of water like a tear in its heart. And the memories of Ireland came flooding back to him. "I must return to Ireland," he told Niamh. "I must see Fionn and the Fianna." "No," said Niamh. "You'll find Ireland is completely changed. You won't find Fionn or the Fianna." But Oisin would not be dissuaded. And so Niamh finally gave him the white steed to ride. But as he mounted, she cried, "Promise me this, Oisin. If I cannot change your mind, you must understand. You may not dismount from this horse. If you do, you will never be able to return to Tir na Nog. If your foot so much as touches the soil of Ireland, you will be lost to me forever." And then she wept. Oisin kissed her and tried to comfort her, but Niamh was inconsolable. Once again the white steed rode to the shore, and the waves of the Atlantic Ocean parted before him and closed behind him as he passed. They rode on, and the western coast of Ireland rose before them with the mighty cliffs of Moher. It was daybreak when they reached Almu, the headquarters of the Fianna at Leinster. But Oisin could not find Fionn nor the Fianna. There were no sign of them. only overgrown weeds and nettles were the only silent witnesses that no one had passed by here for many years. Fionn searched the countryside for some sign of Fionn and the Fianna. Finally, he saw two young men struggling, trying to lift a boulder. The men looked weak and puny compared to the mighty warriors of the Fianna. Oisin rode his horse towards them and asked, "Have either of you seen Fionn or the Fianna?" The two men looked at him in wonder, and one of them scratched his head and said, "Fionn look cool. My grandfather had stories from his grandfather about the noble Fionn and the salmon of knowledge." And then the two men laughed together and went back to their work, sweating and straining. Out of exasperation, or maybe out of pity, Oisin leaned forward to help the two men, and he reached out and with one hand easily tossed the boulder. But as he did so, the golden girth snapped and sent Oisin tumbling to the ground. He stood for one moment, towering over the young men. And then, as the young men watched in wonder and in horror, he shrank, and his skin shriveled into wrinkles and folds, and the sight left his eyes. Oisin knew what had happened. What had seemed like 3 years in Tir na Nog was 300 years here. And now those years had caught up with him. The young men took Oisin to St. Patrick, and when he finished telling his story, the church bells chimed across the land. St. Patrick called for a scribe to write down Oisin's story just as he told it. And so we have it now, and I can tell it to you. After he had finished his story, Oisin closed his eyes for the last time and fell upon a stone and died. Sometimes, even today, fishermen or children standing on the western shore of Ireland point out in the Atlantic Ocean and say, "There, that's the way to Tir na Nog." And yet, for all that, no one has ever seen that white steed or the beautiful Neil of the golden hair again. However, some say that Oisin is only sleeping, dreaming of his return to Tir na Nog.
With a wave of moonlight the dim grey sands with light. Far off by furthest Rosses, we foot it all the night. Weaving olden dances, mingling hands and mingling glances, till the moon has taken flight. To and fro we leap and chase the frothy bubbles, while the world is full of troubles and anxious in its sleep. Come away, come away, come away, oh human child.
The host is riding from Knockgrafton and over the grave of Cluth-na-Bear, Quilter tossing his burning hair, and Niamh calling away, come away, empty your heart of its mortal dream. The winds awaken, the leaves whirl round, our cheeks are pale, our hair is unbound, our breasts are heaving, our eyes are agleam, our arms are waving, our lips are apart. And if any gaze on our rushing band, we come between him and the deed of his hand. We come between him and the hope of his heart. The host is rushing twixt night and day, and where is their hope or deed is fair? Quilter tossing his burning hair, and Niamh calling, away, come away. Quilter tossing his burning hair, and Niamh calling away, come away. Quilter is the bard of the Fianna, and Niamh, of course, is the daughter of the king of Tir na Nog. Yeats features both of them in that poem of his, The Hosting of the She. She is the Irish word for the fairy folk. The gentle people, the other crowd. No one may have seen that white steed or Niamh again, but I did. I did see Niamh. A friend of mine in Ireland last summer named Niamh. And all right, she didn't arrive on a white steed, but it was a white Audi. Doesn't that count? She took me on a trip out of Dublin into the south of Ireland, into County Tipperary. I wanted to travel there because I wanted to see this location of a particular Irish fairy tale. The name of the little village is Knockgrafton, and there is an old motte and bailey. Motte and bailey is an early form of castle construction. The motte is an earthwork mound, and the bailey was the enclosed courtyard. Well, Niamh and I, and even though she's brunette, I call her Niamh of the golden hair, when we arrived, of course, nothing of the castle or the stockades remained, but the motte is there. This next story is indeed a fairy tale with fairies, and it was originally collected by an Irishman named Thomas Crofton Croker. He said he placed this story in his notes. He explains it at Knockgrafton at the Mott, because he heard the story for the first time from a local Irishman when the Mott was within view in 1816. He published this story for the first time in the 1820s, and then W.B. Yeats reprinted it in his collection, Folk and Fairy Tales of the Irish Peasantry, in 1888. Oh, and one further point. Thomas Crofton Croker, in his notes, also gives us this melody that you're going to hear as the fairies sing. It is a truly ancient Irish tune. And so, the Legend of Knockgrafton. Once, there was a poor man who lived in County Tipperary in the fertile glen of Ahirlow, below the gloomy Galtee Mountains. He had a great hump upon his back. It pressed him down, his chin pressed to his chest, and he walked very slowly on account of the great hump, and he was forever looking at the ground. Lusmore, for that was his name, and it was a nickname given to him because he was always wearing a sprig of the Lusmore, or the fairy cap, what we call the purple foxglove, in his little straw hat. Well, be that as it may, one evening he was walking home very slowly from the pretty little town of Care, and he walked ever so slowly because of that great hump, and he knew it would be many hours and a long journey ahead of him. And so, just as he reached Knockgrafton near that old Mott and Bailey, night was coming on, and he was feeling weary and tired, and so Lusmore decided he would rest himself upon the hillside of the old Mott. And so he rested his back against the Mott and looked mournfully at the moon. Presently, he heard unearthly music. There were voices coming from within the Mott. And they were singing the days of the week in Irish. But only the first 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, over and over again. And when the round of the melody completed itself, it just returned. Well, he listened, bewitched to the fairy song, for indeed it was fairies within the Mott. But then he grew tired of the repeating of Monday and Tuesday. And so he listened carefully and caught the tune and raised it. J. Lewin, J. Marsh, August, J. Katie. J. Lewin, J. Marsh, J. Lewin, J. Marsh, August, J. Katie. Adding Wednesday. Fairies were delighted with that sound, and suddenly they started singing it the way he had taught them, and then a great whirlwind came. Up and up and up it lifted Lusmore and brought him quietly and softly down within the Mott, within what appeared to be a grand castle. Oh, the fairies gave him every honor. They had servants tending upon him, everything to his heart's content, and they set him above the fairy musicians. Suddenly, Lusmore saw a great hubbub going among the crowd, and he was getting very frightened, and one of the fairies came towards him and said,
Lusmore, Lusmore, doubt not nor deplore, for the hump which you bore on your back is no more. Look down on the floor and view it, Lusmore.
And then Lusmore felt his hump tumble off his shoulders and onto the floor. And suddenly, he could stand straight and tall. Oh, the fairies gathered around him and were dancing and singing the song as he taught them. And everything was joy and rapture and fairy music. Suddenly, Lusmore grew very dizzy, and his eyelids grew very heavy, and he fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Lusmore woke with the chirping of the birds. Oh, it was a bright, sunny day. And the first thing Lusmore did after saying his morning prayers was put his hand on his back to feel for his hump. But it wasn't there. Lusmore could stand straight and tall, and not only that, he was now a handsome and a dapper fellow, for the fairies had given him a new suit of clothes into the bargain, and he went happily home, joyous and radiant. Well, the story about Lusmore and his hump soon spread throughout County Tipperary and beyond. One day, while Lusmore was sitting in front of his little cottage, he saw an old woman walking up the path, and she said she was asking directions to the Glen of a Heirloom. Well, I need not be giving you any directions, ma'am, said Lusmore, for this is the glen itself, and what are you after wanting here? Oh, said the old woman, I heard this story about a man who lives in this glen, who had a hump taken off him by the fairies by some charm. And oh, my own son, Jack, oh, he's got a terrible hump on him. And I was hoping that maybe the fairies would take it off him too, if I could just learn that charm. Well, Lusmore, who was ever a kind-hearted and a sweet man, told the old woman everything. About Knockgrafton and the old mott, about the song coming from within the mott and the days of the week, and how he added Wednesday and raised it. Oh, the old woman thanked Lusmore and went all the way home to County Waterford, where she told her son what she had heard. Her son was Jack Madden, and he was a peevish, selfish, and altogether unpleasant, to tell the truth, fellow. But the next morning she put Jack in the cart, and they rode all the way to Knockgrafton, and it was nightfall when they arrived there. And she left her son there alone and went on her way, promising to return in the morning. Jack sat the old man with his hump, wanting to get quit of this place. And then he started to hear music. He just wanted to quit this fairy-haunted place and get quit of his bad hump. And he didn't care about the tune. He didn't care about the tone. He didn't care about the time. And he heard that if one day was good, two was better. And he shouted out, J. Jordy, J. Tina, adding Thursday and Friday. He thought that if one day was good, two was better. And that if the fairies gave Lusmore one suit of clothes, he deserved two. Suddenly, there was a great whirlwind, and he was swept up and brought down within the mott with a great thud. And the fairies came screeching and screaming at him.
Who spoiled our tune? Who spoiled our tune?
And then one of them stepped forward to him and said,
Jack Madden, your words came so bad in. The tune we felt glad in, the castle you've had in, that your life we may sadden. Here's two humps for Jack Madden.
And then the fairies rolled out Lusmore's hump and pressed it down upon Jack's back over his own hump. And then they started screeching and beating him, screaming, out, out, out. The old woman found her son Jack there at the old mott in the grey light of morning, beaten and bruised, with two humps upon his back. But they were too frightened to say a word, lest the fairies give him a third, or her. Oh, it was a sorrowful journey all the way home. And with the long journey and the weight of his two humps upon him, Jack Madden soon died thereafter. And they say his dying words were a curse to anybody who ever listened to fairy music again.
Come away, come away. the solemn eye. He'll hear no more the lowing of the cows on the warm hillside, or hear the kettle on the hob sing peace into his breast, or see the brown mice bob round and round the oatmeal chest. For he comes, the human child, through the waters of the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, he comes. For the world's more full of a weaver than he can understand.
Once, there was a widow who lived in a cottage hard by a forest, deep in the Tatra Mountains of Central Europe. She lived with her 2 daughters. One girl, Polina, was her own daughter, and the other, Marushka, was her stepdaughter. And whereas Marushka was beautiful and kind and sweet-tempered, Polina was plain, selfish, and mean-spirited. Marushka had to do all the work around the cottage and in the garden, while Helena only lounged about the cottage. Years passed, and Marushka only grew more and more beautiful, while Helena grew plainer and meaner. The mother worried. All the men would come to woo Marushka and leave her own daughter alone. Finally, she decided to be rid of her. But when? She decided she would wait until Marushka had done all the work in the garden in the summer and brought in the harvest in the autumn. And then, in the dead of winter, she would be rid of her. But how? One cold January night, the sky was clear and the moonlight shining through the forest trees upon the newly fallen snow, and Helena sat at her mirror and sighed, "Oh, I'm tired of winter. I want it to be spring. I want flowers. I want violets. I want violets for my hair. Yes, Marushka, go out there and find me violets." Violets? In January? But the mother saw her chance, and so she grabbed Marushka and said, "Yes, Marushka, go outside and find your sister violets, and don't come back without them." And then she tossed her out into the night, out into the cold, out into the snow, and slammed the door and bolted it shut. Oh, it was bitter cold outside. Marushka couldn't keep warm no matter what she did, and she was sure she was going to die. When suddenly, she saw a light at the top of the mountain, and so she climbed that mountain towards that light. And when she came upon the mountaintop, she saw a great bonfire, and around that fire were 12 tall stones, and upon each stone was a man. The first 3 men were young and handsome. The second 3 men were mature and strong. The next 3 men were older, and the last 3 were older still, the eldest, with long white beards, and of course, the wisest. Upon the topmost stone sat a man holding a great cudgel. He was Great January, and the men were the 12 months. "Please, sirs," said Marushka, "I am so sorry to disturb you, but may I warm myself by your fire?" Great January nodded, and Marushka warmed herself by her fire. "What is your name, little girl, and why are you out alone in the forest in the night?" "My name is Marushka, and I was forced out of the house to find violets for my mother and sister. They won't let me return without them." "Violets? In the snow? In January?" And then he looked to one of the younger men and said, "Brother March, take the high stone." Brother March did so, and Great January handed him the cudgel. Brother March sat upon the high stone and waved the cudgel over the flame, which shot up into the moonlit sky. And suddenly a patch of snow melted, and green leaves sprung up, followed by the beautiful violet blossoms. "Quick," said Brother March, "gather the violets while ye may." Marushka did so, and gathered a handful of them, and the snow swallowed the rest. Marushka thanked Brother March, and thanked Great January and all the men, and hurried home. The mother and Marushka were surprised to see Marushka return, but Helena just grabbed those violets and took them for herself. The next night, Helena sighed. "I am tired of the dried foods of winter. I want something sweet and juicy. I want strawberries." "Yes, Marushka, go out there and find me strawberries. Strawberries in January? You found me violets. Go out there and find me strawberries." And the mother grabbed Marushka and tossed her out into the night and slammed the door and bolted it shut. Oh, it was even colder than the night before, and now there was no moonlight. It was very dark. The clouds had rolled in, threatening a terrible storm. Oh, but Marushka looked and saw the light. And so she went up towards the light. And when she reached the circle of the men, she said, "Please, sirs, may I warm myself by your fire again tonight?" Marushka. January nodded. "What are you doing out here again tonight?" And Marushka said, "Oh, now my mother and sister say I must bring them back strawberries, and I can't return home without them." Strawberries in the snow in January. And then Great January turned to one of the men in his prime and said, "Brother June, take the high stone." Brother June did so, and Great January handed him the cudgel. Brother June sat upon the high stone and waved it over the fire, and the flames shot up into the dark, cloudy sky, and a patch of snow melted, and green leaves grew up and burst into white blossoms, which turned into the red and luscious fruit. "Quick," said Brother June, "gather the strawberries while ye may." Marushka grabbed a handful of them, and the snow swallowed the rest. She thanked Brother June, she thanked Great January and all the men, and hurried home. The mother was shocked to see that Marushka returned again, and Helena saw those strawberries and grabbed them and took them and ate them all herself. The next night, Marushka sighed. Oh, that it was colder and worse than all the other nights, yet it was coming down in a fierce snowstorm. But meanwhile, Helena only said, "Oh, those strawberries were so good. But tonight, I want something tart. I want something crisp. I want apples. Yes, Marushka, go out there and find me apples." "Apples? In January? You found me violets. You found me strawberries. Go out there and find me apples." Yes, Marushka, find your sister apples, and I say, don't come back without them! And out she tossed her and slammed that door and bolted it shut. And it was indeed, as Marushka said, a worse and colder night than before. It was bitter chill, and the snow was coming down. But she saw the light, and she went up the mountain towards that light. And Great January saw her and said, yes, Marushka, you may warm yourself by our fire. Marushka did so. And what are you doing out here again tonight? Oh, now they say I must bring them apples, and I cannot return home without them. Apples. Apples in the snow in January. And then Great January turned to one of the older months, but not among the eldest, and said, Brother September, take the high stone. Brother September did so, and Great January handed him the cudgel. He sat upon that high stone and waved the cudgel over the flames, and the fire shot up into the snow, and a tree nearby shook its branches of its icicles, and suddenly burst into blossom of pink and white, which turned into the round green fruit that blushed into a deep and glowing red. Quick, said Brother September, shake the tree and gather only the apples that fall. Marushka did so. She shook the tree. First one apple, and then another fell. She grabbed them, and the snow covered the tree again. She thanked Brother September. She thanked Great January and all the men, and hurried home. The mother and Helena were furious to see her, but Helena grabbed those 2 apples and ate them herself. But the apples were so tart, so sweet, so delicious, that Helena only craved more. Where did you find those apples? Did you eat the rest yourself, you little brat? No, said Marushka, I found them on the mountaintop. Those are the only ones I could take. Then Helena, in her madness, grabbed her cloak and rushed out in search of those apples. They're on the mountaintop, said Marushka. And then Helena went up the mountaintop, and she was angry, and she was cold, and she walked straight through that circle of men to the fire, and turned to them and said, my sister found apples here. Tell me where they are. And then Great January raised his cudgel to the sky, and the fire went out, and the 12 men disappeared. The wind began to blow furiously that snow into a great blizzard. Helena tried to find her way home, but she grew lost in the snow and died. The mother, frantic to find her daughter, she too went out into the dark night and was lost in the snow, never to return. Marushka inherited the cottage and her father's fortune, and married a handsome young man in a village nearby. And they lived many years in great happiness and joy. Soon the year slides past. Season follows season, and brother month follows brother month. And soon it was November 1st, All Hallows Day, when Sir Gawain left Camelot for his tryst with the Green Knight at the Green Chapel. But no matter whom he asked, none knew the way, until on Christmas Eve, alone and cold, he prayed to the good Virgin. The morning broke crisp and clear. It was Christmas Day, and there, a beautiful castle. The prince of that castle welcomed Sir Gawain and invited him to spend the time there enjoying the Christmas celebrations. Later, at evensong, in the castle chapel, Sir Gawain first saw the prince's lady, whose beauty excelled that of Guinevere, and along with her a withered old crone, who held the young lady by the hand. Sir Gawain enjoyed his time at the prince's castle, and upon St. John's Day, he told the prince of his New Year's Day meeting with the knight at the Green Chapel. And he asked its location. "Why, the Green Chapel is not 2 miles hence," said the prince. "You can spend the rest of the week here with us and not leave until the morning of New Year's Day itself." Sir Gawain happily accepted the prince's invitation, and furthermore, agreed to the prince's challenge of a Christmas time game. Whatever the prince would win on his morning hunt for the last 3 days of the year, he would give Sir Gawain in exchange for whatever Sir Gawain won at the castle as he rested there. That first morning, while the prince was out away at the hunt, the prince's lady stole in to Sir Gawain's bedchamber and tempted Sir Gawain sorely. But he agreed only to a kiss, which she gave him full upon the lips. The second morning she gave Sir Gawain 2 kisses, and on the third day, on New Year's Eve, she gave him 3 kisses, despite her protestations for greater intimacy. Finally, she gave Sir Gawain a gorgeous green silk belt, embroidered with gold, a green girdle to wear about his waist, which she said would protect him from all harm. On each of the last 3 days of the old year, the prince brought Sir Gawain his wins from the hunt, and gave them. First, it was a deer, then a wild boar, and last, a fox. Sir Gawain, in his turn, clasped the prince around the neck, and on the first day gave him 1 kiss, and on the second day 2 kisses, and on the third day 3 kisses. But Sir Gawain kept the green girdle for himself. Now daylight fought with darkness, and the new year dawned with the weather bitter and chill. The clouds cast down cold upon the earth, bleakly snow blustered, and the whistling wind wailed from the heights. Sir Gawain, with heavy heart, dressed in splendid style, first in clothes to counter cold, then in armor burnished bright, and last of all he took the lady's gift of the green silk girdle and wrapped it round his waist. He wore the gift not for its worth or its gleaming gold, but to save himself when he must stand the evil stroke. He mounted his horse that dreary day. The castle drawbridge was lowered, And Sir Gawain departed along with the prince's manservant to show him his way. He sought the green chapel, passing bare bluffs, climbing rocky cliffs where cold clung, and rode over moors and hills covered in snow. Suddenly the servant halted. "I have guided you to this perilous place, and the green chapel you seek is in a ravine just round yonder cliff. Oh, it is a dreadful place. There lives the worst man in the world. No man passes by alive. Oh, good Sir Gawain, leave that grim man alone or face your death. Great thanks for your care, but I will go to the green chapel." "Well then, noble Gawain, goodbye in God's name, for I will not go with you an inch further." The servant then turned his horse and fled, leaving Sir Gawain there alone. "My God, I will not weep or groan." He gave spur to his horse and rode through a thicket and into the ravine and halted there. He spanned every side for the green chapel, but saw no such thing. Instead, he saw a hillock of sorts, all overgrown. He rode, dismounted, and walked around. The grassy mound was all hollow within. It had a hole on each end and on either side. "Oh God! Is the green chapel this mound? In such a place might Satan say matins at midnight. This is a chapel of mischance. It is the most evil, holy place I have ever entered." And then he heard a barbarous sound, as if a great scythe were being ground upon a grindstone. "Who holds sway here? Bide there," came a rough voice from without, and then the Green Knight thrust himself into the chapel, holding an axe with a 4-foot blade. "Sir, so sweet, you honor the tryst you owe. Now take your helmet off. You have a payment here." "My God, I grudge you not your stroke." Sir Gawain bowed, head bent, and showed the bright flesh bare. The Green Knight savagely swung the axe. Sir Gawain glanced, and his shoulders shrank from the sharp blade. The Green Knight stayed the stroke. "What? You are not Gawain, but a coward who flinches with fear. I'll not flinch again, man, but be swift and bring me to the point." "Have at you, then." Heaving up the axe a second time, the Green Knight swung savagely, but again withheld the stroke. "Well, now that I find you have a whole heart, I must strike you." "Thrash on," said Gawain, storming with sudden rage. "You threaten too much." Up went the axe and swung savagely down, but though it swung wildly, slight was the wound. A mere nick on the side of the neck, a shot of blood upon the snow, and Sir Gawain leapt to his feet. "Strike no more, a single stroke is payment all." Bold man. The Green Knight warned, stood back, and leaned upon his axe. "I promised a stroke which you received. Consider yourself paid. First in foolery I feigned a stroke, since you kept your first day's promise and gave me a kiss. The second feigned blow is for the 2 kisses you gave me. But from your failure of the 3rd day comes that little cut you took. That braided belt belongs to me. Do you understand? I instructed the wooings of my wife to try your honor. You failed but little, not for a well-wrought thing or for wooings either, but for the love of your own life, which is less blameworthy." Sir Gawain flushed with fury and with shame. He tore the knot and flung the green girdle. Curses on cowardice and covetousness. Lo, there's the false thing. I acknowledge my lie. Award me your penance. Brave man, you have made amends enough. Now take up your belt, as green as I am, and wear it in Camelot as a fitting token of your adventure with me. I shall wear it, but not for its gold, but as a sign of my sin. But tell me, Sir Knight, who or what you are, and why come you hither to test me? Bertilac is my name, sent by the mighty Morgan Le Fay to test the honor of the Round Table and to grieve Guinevere. That aged crone you saw at my castle is the fairy herself. And now then, good sir, let us return to my castle and make merry together one more time. Sir Gawain refused, and so the two men clasped and kissed one another and parted well. Sir Gawain to his steed, and the gallant in green to wherever he would elsewhere. Sir Gawain rode to Camelot, where he was greeted by king and queen and nobles with joy and jubilation. He told them of his adventure, of the prince, the castle, his lady Morgan Le Fay, the green girdle, and his tryst with the knight at the green chapel. This belt confirms my blame, he said at last. But the king and the court comforted him. Let every brave man of the Round Table henceforth wear a baldric, said King Arthur. In honor of Sir Gawain, a band of bright green about them, and to this the nobles and their ladies answered aye. This story of old, which we have told, happened in times of yore. And now for your hearing, gracious and kind, may God bring you bliss evermore. We'll take a short break, and those of you who'd like to stick around, we're happy to answer questions about the program, and then end with one short little poem to send you out into the cold night.